Poverty is not just the absence of money, but the absence of opportunity. And the United States is a country where you have both freedom and abundant opportunities. And moving to the United States has given me both. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I came from a close-knit family. I was the third of four children. And the best thing that my parents gave me was the gift of education. Even though I came from a poor family, they gave me education with the instruction that this is the tool that will help me to dig my way out of poverty and ignorance. But what my parents did was that they instilled in us the value of faith, hard work, and not giving up. They made us realize that if you put in the work, you will definitely get the reward. I came without a dime in my pocket. All I had was big dreams, determination to succeed, and the resilience. I got my first job at the age of 14. My job was on a construction site. My duties were to move concrete on a large pan from one end of the construction site to another one. I worked on that day from around 6 in the morning to about 7 at night. At the end of the day, the employer refused to pay me. And the reason was because she did not authorize the foreman to hire me. So I worked from sunup to sundown and didn't get paid. That tore up my spirit. And from that moment on, I decided that I was going to become a lawyer. And I was going to use every ounce of strength within me to fight against injustice, regardless of how powerful the opponent is. I am a man that worked my way up from nothing. I know what it means to feel like you're being unfairly treated, and I'm the person that can stand up to opponents regardless of how big or how powerful they are. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel Olawale. I have a wonderful guest with me today. This is a person that I met for the first time in person, when I was running for judge in 2014. And I have to tell you, from the moment I met her, I felt this connection, this connection to her humanity, to the kind of person that she is. I felt like I met someone special. Her name is Judge Hawkins, Monica Hawkins. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and the same to you. We met years ago, and I remember when you first started practicing, and we did have kindred spirits, and I appreciate your accolades, and I appreciate your compliments, and extend them to you as well. And thank you for having me here on this fine Saturday. And also, I wanted to send out a special thanks for your legal angle. I've watched it over time, and you have really evolved and have really educated the community and provided access to legal services and resource and even education for the lay people in our community. And I commend you for that, and all the judges before me who've come out to talk about different topics and different attorneys. I just think that's a wonderful resource that you've provided to our community. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show again. Yes, now let's talk more about you, because we want to get to know you more on the show today. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yes. So my name, if you don't know me, is Monica Hawkins, and I'm currently a judge on the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas Domestic Relations Division and Juvenile Branch. And that's a long word for family court. This is my fourth year. I was sworn in on the bench in 2019, and I have a 6 year election cycle, and I'll be running again in 2014. So I'm in my fourth year, and I tell you, time flies when you're having fun. I love family court. I am a Columbus, Ohio native. I am a graduate of Columbus City Schools. I graduated from Independence High School. I was raised by a very strong mother. My mother and father got divorced at a young age. They got married at a young age and got divorced at a young age. My dad stayed involved and engaged, but again, still my mother had to raise us as a single-headed household. After graduating from Columbus City Schools, I went to the Ohio State University, where I obtained my undergraduate degree in criminal justice and criminology. And during that time, I also had a child, Deontay Johnson Senior. Now he was just Deontay Johnson. I didn't get married. Me and his dad had a great relationship, but it ended, and I was a single mom and found myself in my last year of college. So that was probably the impetus to make me to be more grounded and more purposeful on what I wanted to do, because I know I wanted to raise my son in a strong Christian based home. I wanted to make sure, even though his father was absent, that he had all the tools available to him in the village and the surrounding and the education and the foundation and principles to make him a successful Black man. And I think I've been successful in doing that with my village. So after I graduated from Ohio State, I started working as a child welfare caseworker at Franklin County Children's Services. And I worked there for approximately 20 years. Loved the job. It was very emotionally challenging, but my purpose in life has always been justice and being an advocacy. And I can tell you a little bit later when we talk about how God purposed my journey and how I ended up becoming a judge. But when I worked for Franklin County Children's Services, it was around the time that the crack epidemic took place. And I start seeing our communities being plagued with homelessness, poverty, sickness, disease, addiction, torn homes, people, families just being ravished by by the addiction and the disease, and criminalized. So I work with families really closely. As a child welfare caseworker, I dealt with families that were children that were abused, neglected, dependent, and delinquent, and unruly and runaways. I worked intensely with family, providing case management services. We provided counseling, we provided resources, we provided outlets, we provided foster care. So we're really entrenched and impacted by working there. At some point in time, I had a vision to go to law school. I wanted to go to law school when I first went to Ohio State, but again, delayed but not denied. I went to Capital University Law School at night and worked part-time as being a full-time mom, and was still involved and engaged in all my child's activities. Graduated from Capital University Law School and stayed on at Franklin County Children's Services as their attorney, staff attorney. Was promoted in all jobs as a caseworker and also as a attorney. Worked as an attorney for about 10 years, and God led me to some resources, some families, and some people, the Democratic Party, and they picked me or selected me to run for judge. I ran in 2014, and I ran against a Republican opponent that was appointed. Was not successful, but I still think that was the greatest thing that happened to me, because I got engaged in a political family and a political arraignment, and had networking and all kind of possibilities afforded to me. And for a period of time, I worked as a public defender, not a public defender. I worked in the Franklin County uh, District Attorney's Public Defender's Office as an investigator. So my whole life, and now as a judge in the same court that I practice in as a caseworker and as an attorney. And so my life, I can say, in dealing with families, I've seen from the cradle to the grave. Because when I worked at the Federal Public Defender's Office, I worked in the Capital Habeas Unit, and that's people on death row. And what was very impactful to me was to see that the majority of the people on death row or have life sentences started out in some child welfare system somewhere in some county. And the neglect and the abuse and the dependency started well before they became a criminal. And that there were things that were missing, and these children were suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. These people were suffering from benign neglect. They were dealing with emotional, educational, and physical, and sometimes sexual abuse, and just not having parents and schools and committed people in their community to help raise them up to be productive citizens. And then they got diverted into a area of delinquency and then later adult crime and then had their lives ruined. So even though my path sometimes has been heart wrenching, and even though it's been sad, because I've seen people on my caseload and on my docket now as a judge die, kids dying on our caseload before they're able to have their cases adjudicated. I do believe God purposed me to be here to work with families and provide a different perspective on the bench. I think our bench and all our elected official positions and all our government positions should reflect our community, educational wise, social, economic, class, race, culture, religious background, gender, sexual. Any we had to have diverse because you need a different lens when you're dealing with the community, and we can no longer look at it with the European lens, and we have to look at because Columbus and Franklin County is a microcosm of the world. I just spoke with our director of our language services, and we have over 200 languages and dialects in Franklin County. We have a large Nepali population. We have a large Somali population. We have a large New Guinea population. We have a large Asian population. We have a large African American community population and white and Jewish. And I don't know if I covered everything, but we are a microcosm. So we have to get rid of all these small lenses and looking from things through one lens. And I think God placed me on the bench because of my educational background, being a Black woman, being raised by a single head of household, and being a single head of household, Christian values, humanity. I believe I'm humble and I love our community and I'm committed to being here. And I still live in our community. I still hang out in our community and I try to get engaged and volunteer and have a hand on the pulse of our community. And I think we definitely need that in every aspect of the legal system to make sure we ensure justice. And justice has to be blind. And the only way justice is going to be blind and fair is if we have different lenses and different perspectives to see from whence people came and help them through their challenging times.
Thank you. Wow, that was profound. You said you need different lenses when dealing with a community that is diverse. That's very profound. And you mentioned that you were raised by a single parent. What was it like growing up and being raised by one parent?
It was challenging. I was the oldest of three children, and I was the girl, and I was the precocious and very mature one. So even though my brothers may not have sensed it, I saw the struggles that my mother had to endure. And I remember her always being financially strapped and us not having always the best means. But what I can say, it instilled, and I'll try to be positive with it because no matter what meager ends you have or means, you can still raise your children in a loving home and fear and admonition of the Lord. So, for as much as my mom struggled, we still had food every day. We had meals. She made sure we ate decent meals every day. She cooked dinner every Sunday. I think being raised by a single head of household made me more aware of being conscientious of money, being more frugal, being more astute, thinking about credit score early because I didn't want to have bad credit and didn't want to have bill collectors calling me and didn't want to have the struggles that I remember my mother and other single women had to deal with and trying to make sure you maintain your family. So I think that really instilled the first principles I had in trying to be educated, resourceful, independent, not reliant upon people and systems and services. And if I was reliant, it was for a short period of time. But learning how to access the resources that were availed to me to make sure I had an education and resources and was empowered to raise my son up and change a generation and go forward and instilling a legacy and transgenerational blessings. But on the flip side, my childhood was fun. My mother and her sisters, they were all close. So me and my cousins were all close. We enjoyed drive-ins. We went to the pool. We rode our bikes. We got gifts. We lived a good life. And a lot of times you don't know you're poor until you're grown and say, wow, my parent really struggled. And, so it was tough. But my dad, like I said, was very active. He came over at least 3 or 4 times a week. We stayed with him, and did visits with him until we got teenagers. Teenagers, you don't want to be bothered with either parent. But yeah, I had a good life. It was tough, but it made me who I was, and it showed me the pathway. And I believe, just like with our children, even if you're raised in less than welcoming conditions, if you have people in your life to expose you and show you that you can be above and beyond what your current situation is, you can do things. And I think that's why I stay involved, and I taught my son to stay involved, because our kids, especially our Black kids and our poor Black kids, have to see Black attorneys like yourself, or African attorneys, Black judges, Black police chiefs, to see that they can attain and achieve to these levels as well as we can. And we're just as smart and just as competent and just as capable. I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I have a world of common sense, a world experience, and I have compassion and a heart for humanity. And I think that overrides going to a Ivy League college. So I just like to impress upon our kids, all races, that you can achieve and go better and go beyond what your parents have done if you just apply yourself and surround yourself with the right people and take advantage of the resources around you and think purposeful and think beyond what your limits are.
Thank you. You can only aspire according to the level of exposure, according to the
Yes.
level of the things that you can see.
Yes,
Uh,
sir. Yes, sir.
and, being you're raised by a single parent, and then you also happen to become a single parent while you're in college.
Yes.
What was that like for you when you realized that you might have to go through the path of being a single parent? And you said you didn't like what your mom went through.
Right. So again, like I said, I think that was the impetus to say, okay, you got to get it together and don't let this be a setback. Let this be a setup for something greater. So I finished school. I was purposeful and I was goal directed. I moved back home, stayed with my mom, and she was very helpful and very resourceful. And I buckled down. I still obtained my degree from Ohio State, graduated on time, graduated with great grades. And once I graduated, I had to be a mother. So, and I wanted to go to law school, but at that point in time, my priority was raising my child, making sure he had all the things that he needed to be to develop. So that's when I started working for Franklin County Children's Services. So I think being a single mom matured me a lot faster. I had to put away childish things and think about being responsible and being accountable for my son and being present for my son, making sure he went to daycare, he had all his needs met, he had food, he had a loving, warm environment, he was surrounded by loving people. He kept communication with his father and his father's people in Detroit. And I started working to provide insurance, benefits, and a stable income for my son. So I think it matured me faster, and it gave me a bigger purpose in life, that I wanted my son to have available to him everything a two-parent home had, absent a dad. And where the dad wasn't there, I didn't try to substitute him and make him the man of the house, which I think sometimes people make that mistake. He still was able to be a child, but he had resources that maybe weren't available to me. He had access to education and extracurricular activities. I raised him in church. I did all the things I can to instill great principles and a foundation for him. And now he's broken that generational curse. He is now married. He got married to a beautiful woman that he met in college. He is an entrepreneur. Many people probably know him in the community because he's a coach. He is a Soul business proprietor in Soul Classics shoe boutique. He has a platform with help in the youth. He's on the board at the Huckleberry House. He graduated from Ohio State University, played football, and got a full scholarship. His wife is a CPA, and they have four wonderful children that they had as issue of their marriage. They got married first and had the kids, and they're doing the things right. So again, no matter what your circumstances is and where your starting block is, you can break those generational curses and push out a legacy. So my son is doing all the things I expected him to do and imagined him to do. And he went beyond my wildest dreams because I always pushed and propelled him that going to school was not an option. Getting a higher education was not an option. Being successful was not unsuccessful was not an option. It was not an option to fail or get involved in delinquent activities or be disrespectful or be lazy or be a dole in the community. All those things weren't an option for him. So I'm just so proud that my son is just a phenomenal person and he's raising phenomenal children, and I get to see the fruits of my labor.
Thank you. You laid the foundation for his success.
Would you say?
I said you laid the foundation for his success.
Yes, yes. So that's just, a shout out to single moms. You can do it. And single dads, because that's one thing I do find as a judge. Fathers are just as impactful and just as involved. So we have to break the stereotypes that men, especially Black men, aren't involved in their family's life. I see fathers every day fighting for custody, fighting for shared parenting, fighting to see their children, paying child support, and they need the support too, and they need some of the stereotypes broken as well, saying that they're absent fathers and they don't want to be bothered with their children and they don't want to be in their lives. I see many Black men involved in their children's lives significantly. They just don't have a ring and they're just not married. But again, that's not for me to judge. But there's an overwhelming number of Black men and African men that are in their children's life on a daily basis. And so I want to break that myth that Black men and African men are lazy and don't want to raise their kids. That's not true. That's definitely not true. And even though parents aren't married, they can co-parent and raise their kids jointly and make sure their kids are good productions of the system and not end up in our system. Because I'm telling you, our system is a horrible system to get mangled up in.
Thank you. And are you the first person in your family to go to college?
Yes. So I'm the first person in my generation to graduate from college. And my son, in that generation, there's four that graduated from college. So yes, I was the first one. I was the blueprint, and I'm the first attorney in our family, and I'm definitely the first judge in our family.
Okay. What inspired you or pushed you to go beyond the boundaries that were set before you, and you broke that barrier and became this, first that, and first everything?
I think all of us, whether you believe in God, have an innate call and purpose. Everybody, I believe, you're born like a seed. And you always say, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And then you have a nut and you have a seed. All of us was born with potential. I believe everybody has a call in their life. And I think what happens is you're directed in your path and in your journey in life, and you take advantage or you don't, and you end up in different paths in life. And I remember always as a child being inflamed when people weren't treated fair or treated right. I probably got more fights taken up for someone than my own self, and I would prefer somebody to mistreat me as opposed to treating somebody else. So all my life, I fought for rights for people. I fought for the voiceless to have a voice. I fought for bullied people, and I just had a low tolerance for any of that. And I think I've just always had that spirit of justice and being fair and treating people with respect and giving people that human dignity, no matter if they look like me, they smell like me, if they like the same things as me, if they like boys or girls. I mean, I just never believed in treating people wrong just because they don't look like you or don't have the same beliefs as you. So I've always had that in me. And then I had people in my life. My mom and my dad were both blue collar. And before that, people graduated and dropped out of school and got married. My grandmother, I think, got married at 16. But my parents, I was surrounded with people, aunts, uncles, boyfriends of aunts, and girlfriends of uncles. And that told me and kept putting that in my life. You can be an attorney. You love to argue. You got the, the tongue, the gift of tongue or whatever, and sharp. So I just had a lot of people around me, my village, what I call you, that navigated me through life. And even when I didn't know what I was doing, I could look back now and see that my steps were ordered. And I always was supposed to be where I am today. And even when I didn't think I would ever become a judge, or judge wasn't even in my vocabulary in high school, I knew I was going to be something that had to do with justice. And at first, I thought it was going to be criminal justice, the penal system, or police, because my dad was a police officer, but it ended up being justice. And I never would have imagined being where I am today. And I am overwhelmed with gratitude, with love, with humility, because even though I do feel comfortable and I believe I'm supposed to be here, it's looking back in the backward lens in the rearview mirror saying, wow, this was all supposed to happen. And people that come to me now, sometimes when I see them when I was a kid, they said, we always knew you were going to be a judge. We always knew you were going to be an attorney. So it's a theme. And I think everybody in their life, if you look back, there's something that burns your spirit and you just cannot let it go. And that's your calling. And you just need to germinate. It needs to be refreshed. It needs to be tilled. Sometimes it needs to be pruned. Life ain't always easy. I've had my bad days and my good days, and I've had challenging situations. I've had trials and tribulations, but I don't regret anything that has happened to me, because it all made me the woman I am, and it made me the fortuitous woman I am today, and it made me able to persevere and deal with racism, sexism, classism, elitism, all the isms that I think are horrible in this world. Bullyism. I've dealt with a lot. I choose not to focus on the negative. I choose to focus on the positive, and I choose to use my negatives as a positive for people who are watching me, because everything I do now, nothing is for me. I don't count any of this for me. It's for those generation and for the next generation and for other people. Everything that I have, I give it back up to God and I thank Him. And I take none of this for granted, and none of it is for me. I'm just a funnel. And as long as you keep your funnel clean, you'll get all the blessings as an overflow. So I just believe in that. None of this is for me. It's for other people, and it's for young boys and girls and people all around, everybody. I just love everybody. I just want to do right by everybody, whether I agree with them or not. And that's just my purpose. And that's how I ended up like that. And every time I think I can't talk about it, I can talk about it all day, because this is what my purpose is. And I love what I'm doing. And I love the connection I have with people. And I just love people. I just love people.
The Bible says this: the steps of the righteous are ordered by God. It seems like from when you were little, even though you were raised in a single parent home without your parents having college education, it has been ordained that your steps will be different. And here you are. When you decided to join the Franklin County Children's Services and work for Children's Services, what propelled you to do that? What inspired you? Why that agency?
Well, it's weird how that happened. So when I got out of college, I put a bunch of applications in because I thought I was going to end up in the penal system and wanted to be a police officer or work in the criminal justice system. I didn't know anything about children's services. I was raised in a home with our village. I never heard of children's services. I just remember seeing this commercial with this little sad face, and we never had children's services involved in our lives and neighborhood. But a friend of my mother's told me about the agency and had me apply, and I applied and I got an interview, and not knowing what I was getting into. But once I got the job, I got it and I just embraced it and loved it. So again, never having any exposure to children's services, I had no idea what I was getting into. And it's not for the faint of heart. It's not. I've cried many times. I've had people die on my caseload. I've had kids get incarcerated and parents, get on drugs. But I've also seen a lot of success stories. A lot of my clients have come back to me and said, I got it together. I've seen them in grocery stores. I've seen them at the gas station. I've seen them at the courts. And I think just being there for people and they know you're genuine And that's how I ended up in the child welfare system. It was by happenstance, but they hired me and took available. You know, when you get out of college, I always tell you, get your education. But then they say, well, you need experience. I only had experience working at a bank and Burger King, so I didn't have that experience. But Children's Services had faith in me, and they hired me with no experience. And that's where I started my career, and I loved it, and I never looked back.
Okay. And as a young person working with children's services, I know with caseworkers, sometimes you have to recommend that children be removed from abused homes. What was that like for you?
That was really tough because that was the first time also that I had exposure and knowledge that there was termination of parental rights, um, and that is permanent, and that there were some parents out there who were unfit and incapable of raising their children. And that probably was the biggest awakening to me, that parents couldn't and weren't fit to raise their children. And we had to sever their rights and make the children basically legal orphans because the parents weren't capable of raising these children. And seeing that generational curse of uh, mental health issues, addiction issues, benign neglect and abuse, and physical and sexual abuse, and knowing that there's sometimes in some situations, and again, I don't have a crystal ball and I'll never give up on people, but there are some people who aren't capable of being parents and cannot and should not raise their children. And although the Supreme Court says parents have paramount rights, that's to raise your children and to raise your children however you see fit, but there's some time that the state has to interfere, and that's when they believe that a parent is unfit and incapable of raising their children. Therefore, the state has to intervene and try to provide them a long-term alternative than being with their biological family. And that, the Supreme Court says, is equated with the death penalty because it is the death of a family. And that is a somber responsibility, and one I didn't like. And I really labored over those cases. And even as a judge, I on that this end, I terminate parental rights, and I take those with the fine tooth comb, and I scrutinize those cases because I know once you terminate parental rights, there's nothing going back. That family is forever and permanently severed.
Thank you. And you've been working with children all your life and families. And when you are in this field, you witness a lot of violence, neglect, abuse, and a lot of other issues that can, that very sad situations. How do you handle the mental and emotional toll of having to witness all this firsthand, either
Uh,
as a judge or as a caseworker?
okay. Well, and I believe my faith, my strong faith, my family bonds. I have a small resource of women who surround me and protect me. I try to stay involved with my family. I try to exercise. I travel, and I do as much as I can to lighten my load so I don't take that stuff home. I love comedy. I love romance, but I also like the dark stuff like Ozark. I don't know why I'm drawn to that stuff, but I just try to keep a balanced life. I try to keep a balanced life and try to keep my other life, my personal life, as light and carefree and loving as possible to kind of balance and not take home the darkness. And again, I think that's my calling because it's not cut for everybody. There's a lot of people who would never want to be a domestic relations judge or work in that area because out of all the court systems, I believe in the general division and in municipal court, people on their best behavior because they want to avoid going to jail. But in our family court, I believe people in their worst because your divorces, disillusions, custody battles, child support issues, delinquency, abuse, neglect, and dependency. So people are at their worst. They're at their emotional bottoms. So people usually act the worst in those situations. So I try to balance that out with, like I said, being light, being loving, my strong faith, and just trying to maintain that balance. And it's hard sometimes. Sometimes I go home and exhausted, but I try to refresh myself every day. And I love being outside a lot. I love being outside in the park and a lot of greenery and a lot of waters. I like to be around places like that to kind of reset and reset my mind for the next day.
Thank you. And you went to law school at night, evening classes. What was law school like for you?
Well, fortunately for me, when I started Capital, they just started the part-time day program. So only my first year did I have to go at night. So I was able to go part-time during the day. And then I worked the midnight to 8 shift at Children's Services. And then I was able to be home for my son. And I was on call, so I wasn't working there every single day. So I took advantage. So while my son was at school, I was at school. And while he was asleep, I was working. And then I was still able to balance out and be a good mom. So yeah, so Capital had a daytime, part-time program, and that worked best for me. And I was able to do both and be able to work and be able to maintain my health insurance and have money and resources to raise my son. So that was a blessing. So I didn't have to go to night school. I went to day school.
But you were working part time in the evening.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then during law school, you also clerked at a law firm. You decided to clerk at a domestic
Yes.
law firm.
Yes.
Why did you choose that? It
And that's
seems
so
like your
funny.
path has always been to be in domestic practice.
Wait a minute, this is funny, Emmanuel. So I didn't choose it; it chose me. It's so funny how things happen. I met an attorney while I was in law school, and she asked me to come on. It was a small firm, and I worked and started working with them. Had no idea about domestic relations law, and was in law school. And she offered me a decent wage and allowed me to have my hours so I can work it and be a mom. And I just started working there, and I started loving it, and working with families and stuff, and dealing with divorces. So that's how I ended up there. It's like I didn't choose it; it chose me. And the funny thing is, when I went to law school, I took tax classes and business classes. I was thinking about getting my what's it, the LBM, the tax law license, the LBM, and had planned to go to Florida to Gainesville because that was the only place that you can do the joint JD MB. I forgot what that was.
LLM?
LLM. That's where I was going. I said, I'm never dealing with families. I'm done. I'm making the big bucks. And I had planned to go to it, apply, and took all these tax classes, and all the tax classes I took, I got A's, and didn't take one domestic relations class, one juvenile class, because I'm like, I'm not doing family law. And lo and behold, guy had a different plan for me. So I didn't end up there. I ended back up in doing family stuff.
You couldn't get away from your destiny.
Yeah. So I'm not the rich millionaire. Sometimes I regret it, but it is what it is. So yeah, but that was my goal, was to do tax law, but tax law wasn't for me.
And you ended up back with children's services as an attorney.
Mhm. Yeah.
Tell us, how
Yeah.
did you
So
end up going back to the same agency that you were working with before you went to law school?
so it was funny because during law school, they only had two attorneys that worked for children's services, and they covered all the permanent custody cases. While I was in law school, they expanded it and extended it because attorneys start taking more responsibilities, and we start covering more cases. And so they had some openings. And when I graduated from law school, the general director asked me to come in and interview, and said they would like to keep me as an attorney. So that's how I ended up there. I didn't choose it; it chose me.
Again.
Yeah. So I guess I just agree with God's plan. So
And you had a stint with the Federal Public Defender's Office. Can you tell us what you did there?
yes. So at the end of my time at Children's Services, I kind of got it in my spirit that I had done everything I needed to do there, and I wanted to learn and and be of service somewhere else. And I didn't quite know where, but I found out about this position as an investigator with the Capital Habeas Unit. And even though I wasn't an attorney, I was really interested in dealing with that and learning about death penalty cases. So again, that was an opportunity that was made available to me. And then I was also, that's when I had been courted about running for judge. And I knew I couldn't work at Children's Services and run for judge because we're prohibited from doing that. So I stepped out on faith And I left the agency and I went to the federal public defender's office and worked there for a stint and got some experience on another level in dealing with federal government, and just to see if I wanted to do that as well, because I didn't know if I wanted to, it was going to be a judge. It had kind of been put in my ear, but I knew I wanted to do something different, so I was kind of trying to fill that out in the federal system to see if I wanted to practice there or not. And then that's when the opportunity came to run for judge in 2014. So I really love being an investigator, and I think I did a great job there because of my social work background and my substance abuse background, because I got my master's degree and worked as a substance abuse counselor at Children's Hospital while I was in school as well. And I was able to take all my resources, legal, social work, substance abuse, and deal with families there, because all our clients were on death row. Most of them were appealing, and they were appealing to death row because they were saying they were a product of the system. And and it's horrific, and that's why I want to impress that parents need to stay engaged and stay active and take a bigger role in making sure your children are in the right places, hanging with the right people, doing the right things, because the majority of the people that I dealt with on death row, they were there by the age of 18, and it was some dumb event that led to them accidentally killing somebody. And those kids were so remorseful, and you looked at them at 30 on death row, because death row takes forever. It's not immediate. That's why I don't really believe in it, because there's too many mistakes, and it's not instantaneous. And usually by the time that they're actually on death row, most of them have matured and become a different person, and they're remorseful. They hate what they've done, but it was just that one small mistake. One kid in particular, he was on death row, Hamilton County, benign neglect. His mom had mental health issues, father substance abuse issues, raised in the system. The school failed him. He dropped out, probably dropped out of school in the sixth, seventh grade, and just started hanging around the wrong people. And one night they decided to rob a liquor store drive-through, and he had a gun and accidentally shot the owner. Didn't mean to, and got placed on death row at the age of 18. And here he is, 36. And when you look at him, he was still that 18-year-old, but he was so remorseful. And when you look at him, he had the life sucked out of him. I can even tell you he looked like an albino. And that was the first thing that drew my attention, because the lack of vitamin D and the lack of being outside and the lack of socialization, he looked totally different than he did when he went in. I mean, he had absolutely no color to him. And when I met his family, they were all people of darker skin, but not having that vitamin D and not having that social contact, he was so regressed and depressed. But his life was ruined. And that's one reason I think God placed me in this area, to try to stop that. Because I try to tell these kids, once you get into that arena, there's nothing you can do. Once a kid commits that crime of murder, you can't take that back. And all the other crimes, you may be able to be redeemed and rehabilitated, but once you pull that trigger and you kill somebody, you basically, two families are ruined and two lives are lost, because you're never getting out again. And that's hard. And I think I was purposed to work there and work with people on death row, to see that people can still change, people can be rehabilitated, and people can be remorseful for heinous acts that they committed. I'm not saying they should get out, but I think we have to be forgiving. And we're supposed to be a redemptive country and a redemptive community. And we have to give people second chances and sometimes third chances. And that's why I don't like sometimes that people get crimes and they're forever bound and chained to that crime, and they never get a chance to start over. And we do have to give sometimes people that fresh new start if they've proven themselves to be redeemable.
Second chances. And you mentioned that you were courted to run for judge in 2014. That's actually when we met, because that's when I was also running for judge in Delaware County. And
Yes.
that 2014 election cycle, you didn't win. Then 4 years later, you ran again. And obviously, you won 4 years later. What was it like for you on election night, seeing that you're going to be the next judge of Franklin County Domestic Court?
It was indescribable. That night, I felt like I was on cloud nine. It's weird. So when I ran in 2014, as positive as I was, when I lost, it was devastating, but the feeling was different. When I ran the second time, it was kind of like I knew I had it. I knew that was for me. That was the timing. Even the fact that they opened the bench, because domestic relations and juvenile court has had 5 judges forever. And because of the volume and explosion of our community, the legislators in the House decided to add 2 new seats. So I am on one and Judge Stroud is on the other one. So just that timing that they opened up 2 seats, and I was I just felt like I had it. I felt like it was mine. Now I didn't take it for granted. I still ran hard. I still did everything I was supposed to do. Campaign hard, raise money hard. I did everything, but I kind of knew it. I knew it. I just knew it. And that night was the best night of my life. I felt like I was on cloud nine. I don't even, it was like a wedding. I've never been married, but I guess it's like a woman being married, getting married. You just, it was a whirlwind, but I felt like Cinderella. I felt like it was mine, and I felt like I worked and deserved it. So it was incredible. It was incredible. And then,
Yeah.
the numbers, I beat my primary opponent probably by 80% to 20%. And then I beat the fall opponent, it was 70-30. So the community showed up and showed out for me. And that's probably the biggest thing, that the community elected me, and overwhelmingly elected me. And I felt like humble, and felt like they chose me. The people chose me.
I can only imagine the feeling because coming full circle, you have this child raised by a single parent. You have this young woman who had a child and she's also a single mom. She went to law school, she worked hard, then she became a lawyer, she worked all this job. Now she's becoming a judge. And while you were celebrating all that, during that period, you were stopped for drunk driving, and that had to be a downer to your victory. How did you handle that horrible part of that experience?
And you know what? And I have to say, I appreciate you. You have probably been the first person that actually brought it up. I talk about it um, in, indirectly, but you brought it up. So I have to say, I applaud you for taking the cojones and asking that question. So that was probably the darkest point, and it kind of reminded me of the book in Second Kings, when David. Remember when David had just come off his victory, and he fell and got in that trouble with Bathsheba, and and he was exposed publicly. I felt it was a very, very dark time for me, and it was a horrible, horrible mistake, and one I hope that the community understand that I took totally responsibility and accountability for. I would never be one. I've always been transparent, and you never saw me out there saying I didn't do it, or claiming that it wasn't me and blaming other people. I took responsibility and accountability right off the bat, because I was grown. I made a mistake, and I had to. That's a part of being grown. You accept your mistakes as well as the good. So I took the bad with the good. It was a very dark time. Um, I still don't have any memory of that night. Uh, all I can say is that that was probably when I was at my lowest in faith and self worth and self value, because I had hit this high pinnacle. I was at the height of my life, the top of my valley. Now, excuse me, the top of my mountain, and then whew, before 30 days is up, I'm in the valley. So I remember that again. It was my purpose. So people surrounded me. I was overwhelmingly surrounded by people with love. You never know. I don't know how many people called me and said, I've been through the same thing. I've had the same thing. My exposure was public, but people just showered me with love. I know people were praying for me because I didn't even have the strength to pray for myself. I didn't know if I was going to be able to be a judge. All this stuff I had fought for all my life, and it could have been taken away in one night. So I can just tell you that when I went through that, I know I had, again, how I ended up coming out of it was my village people, my church family, my natural family, my fake family, my political family, my legal family, my judicial brothers and sisters. They came to bat for me and they prayed for me, and they offered me words of encouragement, words of empowerment, words of comfort, words of love, and it counteracted all the negative because I got slayed. I got slayed by some, and the Republican Party tried to get me thrown out, and they said some horrible, disparaging things about me. And this, I think the saddest part was people judged me who didn't know me, and people thought the worst of me who had no idea what I was. So I think that has taught me two life lessons. Keep my mouth off of people because you don't know what people are going through. You don't know the backdrop to their story. You don't know the behind the scenes, and you don't know what happened. They only know what happened, or they don't. And it's between God and them. And two, don't judge people and don't prejudge situations. Everybody's a front page story, but when the end of the story is always on the last page. And at the end of the day, even though I'm a judge, I am not the ultimate judge. And God judges the heart. So those are two lessons I learned. Keep your mouth off of people. Stop talking about people, especially if you don't know what you're talking about. Or you do, but if you can't pray for them or offer them words of encouragement, be quiet. And you can be diplomatic in your chastisement of people, but to just how people try to drag people through the mud, it's very hurtful, it's very harmful, but it's okay. And with all the negative people, with all the horrible things people said about it, still say I run in 2014, so I'm sure it's going to come back up. But let them come. Yep, in 2024, let them come, because they don't know I have done a phenomenal job as a judge. The people love me. I think I'm doing a great job. My stats are on point. My ship is airtight. My brain is airtight. And I'm providing what God wanted me to provide. And I think also what I went through with the drunk driving is it taught me compassion. So I can look at somebody and give them compassion and give them another chance. Because if people aren't deserving of second chances, I wouldn't be sitting on the bench now. I wouldn't be an attorney. And look what happened. That turned into something positive. So we have to give people second chances, and we have to be forgiving. And we say we're forgiving, we have to really be forgiving. We can't just say, oh, I love people, and then the first time somebody says something, you want to slam and they need to be fired and be full of vitriol. We hate them and they're horrible people. You don't have to say all that about people. Just don't vote for me. But people, I think social media has made it where people can be bullies and be anonymous bullies and be horrible, horrible, horrible people, but they're cowards because they do it all on the internet, and they know that it's out there for other people to say, but they would never say that stuff to the person's face. So even though I went through that time and I came out of it, I learned two principles: keep your mouth off of people and stop judging people. I'm not the ultimate judge. And people are not perfect, and you have to give people chances. And then and people, and I suffer. I had my disciplinary action, and I had to go through what I went through. I went through a public slaying, and I was disciplined. So, but I still, if I had to do it over again, no, I wouldn't do. I don't know what happened, but I still don't regret it. God meant it for something. The Bible says, it, Emmanuel, God, all things. That means good, bad, and the ugly and different, work together for the good of those who are called according to the Lord. So I have to take the good with the bad and take ownership of the mistake and just keep pushing and just try to prove myself worthy of another term and worthy of being a judge. But it did teach me compassion. I don't judge situations like I used to, and I'm not so quick to judge situations because the media likes to put all the bells and whistles out there, but so many times they don't talk about the end of the story. And And then we also know racism plays into things too, and sexism and elitism and classism, and it is what it is. But yeah, here I still stand. Here I still stand.
The valley moment changed you and made you a better person.
Yes, yes,
And
it did.
it's and it's part of all that. No one can take away that you're the mom of the college former Ohio State football captain Deontay uh, Deontay
Johnson. Mm.
Johnson, and everyone knows him to be a successful businessman, philanthropist. Is doing very well in the community. How do you feel as a mom having raised such a successful black man?
That is probably the best badge of honor for me. My son is my greatest success story. And he is a testament that through trial and tribulation and perseverance and diligence and discipline and integrity, you can amass wonderful and incredible things. And my son brings me so much joy and so much pride. I just he amazes me. He continues to amaze me in the things that he's done. It's again like my journey as a judge. I expected nothing but wonderful things from him. I knew he was going to be great, but just to see the greatness that he is amassed to or come to, it just blows my mind. It blows my mind, and it's kind of like it's incredible, but it's kind of like I knew it. I knew it. I knew my son was destined for greatness. I knew he was. And the funny thing is, so many people thought because his dad played professional football, he was going to play professional football. And that wasn't nothing but an avenue to get resources, networking, a community behind him. And Ohio State treats their athletes good. And, having that respect of being a person he is and a person of integrity, and that's my biggest accomplishment. And my grandkids are, I know they're going to be phenomenal, and he just brings me so much joy. I can just laugh and I cry. I just thank God, and I just am overwhelming gratitude and thank God that he used me, this broken cracked vessel, to be the mother of such a great person. He could have gave me anybody else, but again, I didn't choose Deontay. God chose him for me, and I just thank God that I was able to persevere and do what God directed me to do in raising him. And I didn't take it lightly. And that's my push to parents. Don't take your kids for lightly. They're an investment. It takes time, but you got to put the time and the work in if you want to see the fruits of your labor. And yeah, he is. Oh my gosh, I could just talk about my son all the time. I'm his biggest fan, and he's my biggest fan. And now his
Wow.
wife is, but I'm his biggest mom fan.
Because you've done a great job. You laid the foundation for the man he is right now. And it's been wonderful talking to you for almost an hour now. Uh, and I do appreciate the fact that you step up to on the show to talk to the community. But what does it mean to you for you to be on the legal angle and communicate with the community?
It's an honor and a privilege. And again, I thank you, Attorney Olawale. You do a phenomenal job. I love the fact that you've birthed this. This is a part of your call and purpose. Like I said, I've been watching these, and you have provided so much knowledge to our community, and people, because it's on Facebook Live, people can go back and learn. And you've taught almost every angle of law. I saw the mental health court, I saw the drug court, I saw different bankruptcy law, probate law. I mean, you've covered the spectrum, and I am honored to be amongst all the great people that you've had before me: judges, attorney, business people. And it's an honor and a privilege, and I will be more than welcome to come back and talk any other time. But you're a phenomenal person, and I thank you for what you've provided to the community. You provided a resource, and you've taken social media and used it as a positive platform and not negative. There's nothing but positivity in this platform that you use to educate and empower people. And I admire you, and I've always admired you, and I've always told you that. And I just wish nothing but the best for you, and hope that you just excel in your legal practice. And I hope we maintain our connections. I hope your family is blessed and well, and you stay well. But thank you. It's just a pleasure. And that hour went by quick. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Thank you. And thank you again for coming on the show. It's been wonderful talking to you. And for those of you watching us at home or on your phone, wherever you are, thank you for giving us your time. Without you, we wouldn't exist. Until next time, stay blessed. Bye for now.
Bye.